March 11, 1971. In just 8 weeks, a group of Italian designers unleashed a yellow wedge that stunned the Geneva Motor Show and rewrote every rule of what a car could be. Buyers ignored boiling cabins and shattered ergonomics, desperate to own a rolling fantasy no rival could offer. What did Lamborghini know about desire that let them get away with selling the Countach? The answer begins with that first electrifying reveal. The doors to the Geneva Motor Show opened on March 11, 1971, but nothing on the floor could prepare visitors for what waited inside Carrozzeria Bertoni's display. At precisely 10 in the morning, the yellow wedge, coded LP500, stood gleaming under spotlights, its lines so sharp they seemed to slice the air itself. The body sat impossibly low, with a nose that almost scraped the carpet, and a roofline barely reaching the waist of most onlookers. Scissor doors, never before seen in public, arched skyward, inviting a hush that rippled through the crowd. Journalists pressed forward, their notebooks forgotten, as the Countach's silhouette broke every rule of the day. Headlines would later call it a spaceship, a weapon, a provocation. In that moment, it was simply an object of AWE. The Miura, Lamborghini's previous sensation, looked almost timid in comparison. The Countach's stance, all forward thrust and rear haunches, made everything else feel like yesterday's news. Cameras flashed, reporters from Road and Track and Autocar scribbled feverishly, struggling to put the shape into words. The car's name, Countach, a Piedmontese exclamation of astonishment, seemed the only fit. A Bertone craftsman had muttered it during the build, and now it was on everyone's lips. Even seasoned correspondents, veterans of 100 unveilings, found themselves whispering it as they circled the car, searching for familiar details and finding none. The crowd swelled around the stand, drawn not by Lamborghini's badge but by the raw shock of the design. The periscope-style roof, the gill-like intakes, the impossibly wide rear tires, every detail was a dare. Bertoni's Marcello Gandini, the mind behind the wedge, watched from the sidelines, his eyes scanning for reactions. He had spent just 8 weeks taking the Countach from sketch to showpiece, pushing his team through sleepless nights and last-minute metalwork. Now the payoff was written across hundreds of stunned faces. Within hours, the press was calling it the Star of Geneva. Orders began to trickle in, despite the prototype's untested mechanics and the whispered doubts of engineers. It didn't matter. The Countach wasn't just a car, it was an event, a statement, a fantasy made real. Dealers fielded calls from clients who hadn't even seen the engine, buyers who cared only that their names might one day be linked to this vision of the future. By nightfall, the Countach's image had already begun its journey into legend. Photographs from Geneva would soon cover magazine pages and, eventually, bedroom walls around the world. Lamborghini's gamble had paid off in a single day. The Countach had seized the imagination of an entire industry, and no one who saw it that morning would ever look at a sports car the same way again. 8 weeks. That was all the time Marcello Gandini and the Bertone crew had to turn a set of sketches into an object that would electrify the Geneva stage. The process started with a single, sharp line on paper, Gandini's wedge, inspired by earlier experiments like the Alfa Romeo Carabo and Lancia Stratos Zero. But a drawing was just the beginning. Within days, scale models appeared in the studio, each one a little more daring than the last. The team worked around the clock, fueled by espresso and the pressure of an unmovable deadline. In the heart of Bertoni's workshop, artisans known as battilastra, masters of hand-shaping sheet metal, took over. Using wooden bucks, they hammered aluminum into those impossible angles and creases, trusting only their eyes and muscle memory. The car's body was never run through factory presses or industrial dies. Instead, every panel was coaxed into shape with mallets and sandbags, checked against the full-size buck, then adjusted again. The wedge profile demanded precision, a single misstep could ruin the illusion of speed and aggression Gandini wanted. There were no computer models, no digital measuring arms, just tape, chalk, and a fierce pride in craft. Collaboration between designer and fabricator was constant. Gandini would walk the floor, tracing lines in the air, explaining how the scissor doors should slice upward without catching the roof, or how the periscope roof needed to channel light and sightlines without breaking the silhouette. The Batellastra responded with questions and tweaks, sometimes proposing shortcuts to meet the deadline. When the original plan called for a more complex rear deck, the crew suggested a flatter panel that could be shaped in hours instead of days. Gandini agreed, knowing the show car needed to look right from 10 feet away, even if the details were a compromise. Inside, the team faced a different challenge. The cockpit had to appear futuristic but could not be built with production tooling. Diagnostic instruments glowed from a custom dash, wired by hand. The seats were sculpted for drama, not comfort, and stitched from leather cut that same week. Every detail was a race against time. The periscope rear-view slot, one of the prototype's signature tricks, was cut late in the process, after Gandini decided the car's rear haunches were too high for a traditional mirror. With each passing day, the prototype grew closer to reality. Yet, even as the body took shape, the team made choices that would haunt the engineers later. The doors, for example, were beautiful but heavy, and their hinges required constant adjustment. The low nose looked fast, but left little room for the front suspension. Cooling ducts were added wherever space allowed, often as last-minute cutouts when the V12's heat threatened to warp the bodywork. These were the kinds of shortcuts only a coach builder could risk, solutions meant to dazzle on a show stand, not survive a decade on the road. By the end of February, the LP500 prototype stood ready for paint. The team chose a yellow called Giallo Fly Speciale, sprayed on just days before the car left for Geneva. When the transport truck pulled away from the Bertone gates, the workshop was silent for the first time in weeks. The prototype was not just a design statement, but a testament to the speed, improvisation, and hands-on artistry that only a small Italian studio could deliver. Every shortcut, every hand-shaped panel was a gamble, and for one morning in Geneva, it paid off. The Countach shape demanded impossible things from its mechanics. Under that razor-edged body, engineers faced a problem that no one at Geneva could see. The car's heart was too hot for its own skin. The prototype, LP500, was built around a 5.0-liter V12, an engine swollen with ambition, promising 440 horsepower and the kind of numbers that looked good in headlines. But the moment testing began, the dream started to melt. In the cramped bay behind the driver, heat built up faster than the radiators could shed it. The body's sharp lines and tight packaging left little room for airflow, and the magnesium engine block, meant to save weight, only magnified the thermal strain. On the test bench, the big V12 ran hot. Out on the road, it ran even hotter. Engineers watched oil temperatures climb past safe limits, warning lights flickering as the car pushed through each run. Then, during a hard test in 1971, the prototype engine failed catastrophically. It was destroyed by its own heat. The car survived, but the engine did not. With the 5.0-liter written off, the team had to regroup. Paolo Stanzani and Oliviero Pedrazzi, the engineering leads, made the call. The Countach would use the older, proven 3.9-liter V12 from the Miura, tuned to around 375 horsepower. It was not the leap they had promised at Geneva, but it was the only way to keep the project alive. This swap bought reliability at the cost of some spectacle. The decision set off a scramble to rework the entire rear section. The gearbox, originally meant to sit ahead of the engine for better weight distribution, now had to be adapted to the smaller block. Cooling ducts were added, shifted, and cut again, searching for any path that might draw heat away from the engine bay. Radiators grew larger, hoses snaked through the sills, and fans spun at full tilt, but the Countach's body was never designed to let air flow freely. Every fix was a fight against the shape itself. For 3 years, engineers struggled to tame the heat. Test logs from Sant'Agata show a pattern. Each solution fixed one problem and created another. Oil coolers helped, but hot air pooled in the cabin. Larger radiators kept the V12 alive in motion, but in traffic, temperatures soared. The car's signature silhouette, so clean and aggressive on the outside, hid a maze of ductwork and insulation behind its panels. Mechanics, hunched over open engine bays, learned to keep a fire extinguisher close at hand. Packaging the drivetrain meant further trade-offs. The longitudinal layout forced the driver and passenger to sit with their legs stretched forward, almost wedged between the front wheels. The transmission tunnel ran high, narrowing the already cramped cockpit. The Countach's wheelbase shrank to just 2.45 meters, pushing the cabin forward and the engine tight against the firewall. These choices made the car look like nothing else on the road, but every inch of visual drama exacted a price in heat, noise, and complexity. The final LP400 production car, released in 1974, carried the scars of this battle. Its 3.9-liter V12 was reliable enough to sell, but the cooling system remained borderline, good for a blast down an empty road, less so for city traffic or summer afternoons. The Countach's thermal headaches never fully disappeared, yet none of these struggles showed on the surface. The shape stayed pure, the silhouette untamed. Buyers never saw the hours spent chasing heat through the chassis. They only saw the wedge, and for most, that was enough. Owning a Countach meant climbing into a world designed for spectacle, not comfort. The scissor doors, so theatrical on a show stand, became a daily test of flexibility and nerve. Most drivers learned to open the door, perch on the sill, and swing their legs in sideways, careful not to bang a knee on the sharp dashboard edge. Even then, lowering yourself into the seat felt more like squeezing into a cockpit than stepping into a car. The roof hovered just above your head, and the windshield wrapped around so tightly that anyone over 6 feet felt their hair brushing the glass. Once inside, the cabin closed around you. The transmission tunnel rose high between the seats, pushing your legs into a near horizontal stretch toward pedals that seemed to hide under the dashboard. The steering wheel sat almost in your lap, and the footwell narrowed so much that even slim shoes could rub the clutch and brake at the same time. Owners joked that you did not drive a Countach so much as wear it, a suit of Italian armor lined with hot leather. Visibility was another matter entirely. The rear-view mirror offered only a sliver of the world behind, thanks to the broad engine cover and the infamous periscope slot in early LP400s. Parallel parking became a game of faith and geometry. Many resorted to the classic Countach maneuver: open the door, sit on the sill, and reverse with your head outside, looking back at the world you could not see from inside. Road testers at the time described the experience as like piloting a submarine with the periscope stuck. Heat seeped into the cabin from every direction. The mid-mounted V12, crammed just inches behind the seats, radiated warmth until the interior felt like a sauna after only a few miles. Air conditioning, when it worked, was overwhelmed in summer. Owners recalled driving barefoot because the metal pedals grew too hot for shoes. Mechanics, familiar with the car's quirks, warned new buyers to keep a towel handy for mopping sweat during city traffic. Getting back out was its own ordeal. The door sills were wide and high, demanding a practiced roll or a well-timed leap. More than one celebrity was caught on camera struggling to exit with dignity, their bravado undone by the Countach's unapologetic ergonomics. Service records from the era note frequent requests for custom seat padding and steering wheel extensions as owners tried to retrofit comfort into a space that never planned for it. Yet, for all the complaints, cramped legs, roasted feet, invisible traffic, few owners ever gave up their place in the wedge. The badge on the nose and the shock on bystanders' faces made every inconvenience feel like a test of worth. In the Countach, suffering was part of the story. Mechanics who spent hours coaxing overheated engines back to life spoke with a kind of admiration, as if the car's stubbornness was a badge of honor. One seasoned technician summed it up best. If you wanted easy, you bought something else. If you wanted to feel alive, you bought a Countach. Living with the Countach was never about comfort or ease. It was about enduring every flaw and loving the car, not in spite of its demands, but because of them. Each awkward entry, every drop of sweat, and all the hours spent peering over the sharp nose became proof that you belonged to a club defined by devotion, not practicality. For those who craved the fantasy, the Countach delivered every day in every uncomfortable mile. In the 1970s, Lamborghini's Sant'Agata Bolognese factory operated on a scale that set it apart from the rest of the automotive world. While competitors pushed out thousands of cars each year, Lamborghini's output barely reached dozens. The Countach, produced from 1974 to 1990, was shaped as much by the limits of the factory as by its radical design. Total production landed somewhere between 1,983 and 1,999 units, a figure that made even Ferrari's F40, with 1,311 examples, seem almost commonplace. In the first 4 years, only 152 to 157 LP400s emerged, each one assembled by hand, each one a product of patience and persistence. The factory's methods left no room for shortcuts. Every panel was shaped on site, every seat stitched by Lamborghini's own craftsmen. There were no outside suppliers to boost numbers, no assembly lines humming with automation. Workers moved from station to station, sometimes switching from metalwork to wiring in the same day. At peak, the plant finished only a handful of cars per week. When the LP400S debuted in 1978, production rose slightly, but just 235 were built over 4 years. Later variants, the LP500S and the 5000 Quattro Valvole, added to the total, but never enough to threaten the car's rarity. The 25th anniversary edition, produced from 1988 to 1990, marked the highest output with 658 units. Yet, even this did little to dilute the Countach's exclusivity. Spread across 16 years and 5 main variants, the Countach remained out of reach for all but a select few. Scarcity was not just a byproduct, it became part of the Countach's identity. In 1974, the base price was $72,200, a sum that eclipsed most rivals and signaled entry into a world of privilege. The cost was more than a reflection of materials or labor. It was a statement, a barrier, an invitation to a club defined by its limits. For many, the Countach was never about practical transportation. It was a symbol, a trophy, a fantasy rendered in steel and glass. This numbers game fueled desire. Each Countach became a rumor, a name whispered on waiting lists, a silhouette glimpsed in magazines, but rarely on the street. Dealers fielded calls from around the world, but allocations remained tight. Some buyers waited months as schedules slipped or parts ran short. The low output was not always intentional. Financial troubles, changes in ownership, and technical hurdles all played a role, and the effect was the same. Scarcity drove demand, and demand fed the legend. Other manufacturers watched with a mix of admiration and disbelief. Porsche's 930 Turbo sold over 20,000 units. Even Ferrari's F40, known for its exclusivity, saw more than 1,000 built. The Countach, with fewer than 2,000, stood alone. Owning one meant joining a club so exclusive that most would only ever see the car in photographs or behind ropes at a show. The rarity was palpable, amplifying every sighting and every story about the car's quirks. Lamborghini's commitment to hand-built tradition persisted even as the company faced bankruptcy and changed hands in the early 1980s. New owners kept production low, focusing on spectacle over scale. Gray market imports surged in the mid-1980s, but Countach numbers remained steady. Even United States spec models, adapted for strict emissions rules, arrived in small batches. Each car that crossed an ocean added to the myth. The economics of rarity shaped the Countach's story long after production ended. Auction prices for early LP400s now top $1 million, and even the supposedly mass-produced 25th anniversary cars fetch sums that once seemed impossible. Yet, the real value is always psychological. For every owner, thousands dreamed, their longing sharpened by the knowledge that supply would never meet demand. In the world of supercars, rarity became Lamborghini's secret weapon, fueling desire, driving prices, and cementing the Countach's place in automotive history. A single photograph could do what 1,000 road tests never managed: turn the Countach from a rare machine into a worldwide obsession. By the late 1970s, the car's silhouette had escaped the showrooms and found its way onto the walls of millions of bedrooms. The most famous poster showed a red LP400, doors up, crouched on a stretch of empty highway, and it became a rite of passage for a generation. Athena International licensed the image in 1977 and printed it by the millions. For every Countach built, there were thousands of posters shipped to school supply stores, dorm rooms, and toy aisles. The car's wedge shape, immortalized in glossy paper, became less a detail of engineering and more a symbol of arrival. Magazines fed the hunger. Road and Track, Car and Driver, and Autocar all ran covers featuring the Countach, often with headlines that barely contained their excitement. Circulation numbers spiked. Road and Track alone topped 500,000 copies a month in the late 1970s, and each issue multiplied the car's reach. Readers who would never see a Countach in person could memorize every angle, every intake, every impossible line. Dealers, quick to catch on, displayed posters and magazine tearouts in their showrooms, using the Countach's image to lure buyers for everything from the Espada to the Jalpa. The car's presence in print was relentless. It was as if the Countach's true home was not on the road, but in the collective imagination. Toy companies saw the opportunity and moved fast. Polysteel and Corgi began producing die-cast Countach models as early as 1975. Hot Wheels joined in by the 1980s, adding the Countach to their lineup of pocket-sized dreams. Licensing deals exploded. By 1985, nearly every major toy maker offered a version of the wedge, from detailed 1 to 18 scale models to plastic racers barely bigger than a matchbox. These toys introduced the Countach to children long before they could pronounce its name, embedding the silhouette in minds that would later fuel demand for the real thing. For many, the first Countach was something you could hold in your hand, race across a kitchen table, or trade in the schoolyard. The car's image multiplied in unexpected ways. Arcade games like Outrun and Test Drive used the Countach as the ultimate prize, the car you raced toward, the shape that meant you had made it. Television commercials, fashion shoots, and music videos borrowed the wedge for instant impact. Even those who cared nothing for cars could recognize the outline: sharp nose, scissor doors, wide hips. The shape was shorthand for speed, rebellion, and the promise of something better. Cultural scholars would later argue that the Countach became a symbol not just of automotive excess, but of the 1980s itself, a decade that worshipped spectacle and rewarded those who dared to stand out. Branding experts traced the phenomenon to a perfect storm, a design so radical it needed no explanation, a scarcity that made every sighting feel like a discovery, and a media landscape hungry for icons. The Countach's image was not diluted by mass production, it was amplified by its rarity. Each poster, toy, or magazine cover became a ticket to a fantasy, a way to participate in a club that most would never join. For Lamborghini, the real product was not just the car, it was the dream, endlessly replicated, always just out of reach. The Countach taught the world to buy with their eyes first, and for decades, that lesson paid off in ways no rival could match. 50 years after the Countach first stunned Geneva, Lamborghini watched history repeat itself, this time in the digital age. In August 2021, the company issued a press release unveiling the Countach LPI 804, a limited series hybrid that borrowed its silhouette and spirit from the 1971 original. The announcement landed like a thunderclap across car forums and social media feeds. No one had seen the car in person, but speculation and desire erupted instantly. Lamborghini's website crashed under the surge of traffic. Dealers fielded calls from collectors hoping to secure a spot on the list, but the answer was always the same. Every car was already spoken for. Only 112 units would be built, a nod to the internal code LP 112 used for the original project. By the time the official images hit the internet, every car was pre-sold. Buyers didn't ask about hybrid specs or driving range. They wanted the badge, the wedge, the story, something that would let them own a piece of automotive legend. The price, rumored to be around $2 million, did nothing to slow demand. For many, the LPI 804 was less a car and more a ticket into a private club, an artifact that connected them to the myth of the Countach, now reimagined for a new era. Lamborghini's marketing team leaned into the nostalgia. The press kit paired archival photos of the original LP500 with renderings of the new hybrid, drawing a straight line from 1971 to 2021. Journalists picked up the story, describing the LPY 804 as an homage, a resurrection, a collector's dream. The car's profile, with its sharp nose, scissor doors, and low stance, was unmistakable, even as it hid a modern V12 and an electric motor under the surface. For buyers, none of the old flaws mattered. The cabin could be cramped, the visibility poor, the technology complicated. What counted was the aura, the promise of driving something that everyone else would only ever see in pictures or behind glass. In a world obsessed with the next big thing, Lamborghini proved that desire doesn't age. The Countach's shock value still sold out faster than any spec sheet could explain. Inside Lamborghini's headquarters at Sant'Agata Bolognese, a small team of archivists and restorers works quietly among racks of rare parts and stacks of old blueprints. This is Polo Storico, the division charged with preserving the company's most storied creations. In 2017, they took on a challenge that tested every skill they had, rebuilding the original Countach P500 prototype that had been lost since its destruction in a crash test back in 1974. The project began with thousands of pages of period documents and faded photographs. Engineers pored over every detail, from the curve of the fenders to the exact shade of Giallo Fly Speciale paint. Sheet metal was shaped by hand, just as it had been in Bertone's workshop half a century earlier. The interior, with its unique dash and experimental switches, demanded 2,000 hours of labor alone. When the finished car rolled onto the lawn at the Concorso d'Eleganza Villa d'Este in 2021, it wasn't just a tribute. It was proof that the legend could be made real again, down to the last rivet. Collectors and curators have become the new guardians of the Countach story. At Lamborghini's museum, the evolution from LP500 to Anniversary Edition unfolds in a line of glass-polished wedges, each one a chapter in the brand's mythology. Auction houses track the car's growing value with a sense of awe. Early LP400s, once sold for less than the price of a house, now command over $1 million at major sales. Even the so-called mass-produced 25th anniversary models, once dismissed by purists, fetch prices that outpace inflation by a wide margin. The numbers are public, but the real value is harder to quantify. For many, owning a Countach is less about driving and more about holding a piece of history, a physical link to the moment when Lamborghini rewrote the rules. The Countach's permanence is not just measured in dollars or restored prototypes. It lives in the careful stewardship of those who catalog every chassis number, who hunt for original upholstery, who debate the placement of a badge or the curve of a wheel arch. At Polo Storico, every restoration is a pledge to the past, a promise that the legend will not fade. In auction halls and museum galleries, the Countach stands as both artifact and aspiration. It is a reminder that some icons are too powerful to be left behind. Today, Lamborghini still builds machines that defy logic in favor of spectacle. The Countach proved that desire can override practicality, and in a world where image drives markets, fantasy sells better than fact. As supercars become ever more extreme, the lesson endures. Sometimes what we crave isn't perfection, but the pure thrill of the impossible. Thanks for watching. Share your take on the legend below.